Welcome to another episode of Your Next Big Thing. My guest here today is Josie McKee. Josie is a wilderness EMT and technical rescue technician. She has achieved numerous certifications in her field, including firefighter type 2 certifications, and she is experienced in wildland fire search and rescue, swiftwater search and rescue, and she previously was part of the search and rescue team at Yosemite National Park, where you can find some of the most breathtaking views and challenging climbs in North America. As far as I know, I'm not an experienced climber. She is also the founder of Mind Athlete, which is a coaching practice that helps climbers be at their best. And Josie and I got in touch because she's now Director of Operations and Communications at Responder Alliance, which is a fantastic organization. You're going to learn about more here in our conversation, and you can find out more about in the show notes today. I'm really excited to share Josie's story with you. So Josie, thanks for being here. Welcome to our program.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me. And yes, to the question about Yosemite, absolutely. It's one of the most stunning places and challenging and amazing places to climb.
It must have been a meaningful moment to you, Josie, when you started not just visiting the park, but actually working there, being responsible for others in the park. Can you tell me what that meant to you in those first weeks when you were starting out?
Absolutely. It was a dream come true, really, to be able to work and live in that park and to be able to do some of the most amazing things. Like it felt like I was given this gift to learn all the skills, to be able to climb and rescue people off of walls and help people with this skill set that I had already developed. I'd been climbing since I was a kid. And so, developing the skill set to then climb those walls with proficiency and know all the technical systems, and then translate that into being able to help people, was an amazing opportunity. And I do remember a few of those early moments, like you said, in those first few weeks of working there, where I was like, wow, this is like, I feel like I've made it. And this was, I was in my mid 20s and it was that point in my life of making it.
Yeah. What was it like bonding with colleagues there too? Because I have to imagine that there are a lot of people who want to visit the park, others who might want to volunteer, but only a select few really have the skills, the follow through, the abilities to work there and be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. The SAR team there, at the time that I was on the team, there were 8 of us in Yosemite Valley, and then there was another team in Tuolumne Meadows, which is the high alpine part of the park. And we crossed over a little bit. We would do trainings and stuff together. But that core team of 8 of us in Yosemite Valley lived together in this little, like, we all had our own little cabins in the park,
Wow.
in a compound kind of. So we would do, team meals, or we would have a campfire, and we would always go climbing together too. And particularly, I developed a really strong climbing partnership with one of the guys on the team. And we, from there, like, took our climbing to going down to Patagonia and climbing the big mountains down there, and did a bunch of my first like big achievements in Yosemite, climbing big walls in a day together and that kind of thing. It's a tight bond to work in a really stressful situation together and then go on these big climbing objectives together, which are, full days, waking up at 4 a.m. and getting out on the rock and sharing a rope together all day long, and maybe pushing into the night too, and getting scared and suffering a little
Sure.
bit and challenging ourselves both mentally and physically. So, yeah, it definitely creates that kind of bond for sure.
Wow. Yeah. When I was in my mid 20s, I was moving from a startup to working in a big office at a global company. And I was equally excited, but and while there was so many possibilities there were a lot more kind of structures on top of what I was doing. And, my feet were on the ground the whole time. I was not up in the air. So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what search and rescue means and looks like for climbing? Because I want folks to understand you are not just accomplishing technically challenging climbs in your free time or at the park, you were actually rescuing climbers in distress. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should just put the caveat out there that like yes, we were hired for this technical skill set to be able to climb to rescue climbers off of the wall, and I would say that that was probably only 5 or 10% of what we were doing was technical rescues. A lot of times we were searching in the backcountry for lost hikers or carrying someone down a trail after they'd broken their ankle, things like that too. But
Got it.
for those technical rescues, oftentimes someone would be stuck. So El Capitan, if people are familiar with that rock face, 3,000 foot rock face, biggest monolith in North America. If you get stuck in the middle of it and you have most climbers climb with a rope that's about 200 feet long. So you can't just lower yourself to the ground from somewhere on that rock face. And so
Yeah.
it gets quite involved. Sometimes we would fly a team up to the top of the mountain um, to rig technical systems to then lower a rescuer down the face to the injured party, and then either haul them back out, depending on where they were on the wall, or lower them all the way to the ground. In order to facilitate a 3,000 foot lower, we had two 1,200 foot ropes and a 600 foot rope,
That's
all
serious.
fluid, all
Yeah.
tied together.
Oh, okay.
um,
Okay.
so that's like probably the most common technical type rescue that we would do is flying into the top or hiking into the top if we had to, but with that amount of equipment, it's very heavy. So if we can get a flight in, that helps. And then lowering down. Sometimes there's not a great accessible point at the top, or if there was an urgent, like someone more in a life-threatening condition that was closer to the ground on something, we would actually climb to get to them because it was more efficient. And that like even smaller portion of what we did is really why it was so important that we had those technical skills so that we could go out in small teams and climb efficiently and safely to get to someone.
Yeah, because you're balancing not only your focus on the climb, the equipment, the mission that you're carrying out with the rescue, but you're also trying to identify, assess, and react and respond to the person who is in danger here, right? So how did you
Mm-hmm.
balance?
Well, I think the beauty of the system and the team is that there was turnover year to year and there would be more senior members on the team as well as permanent full-time park rangers that would be part of the rescues. So we had other people's supervision for the most part in those early
Got it.
rescues, and I would just be, you know, operating one part of a technical system. So it
Cool.
was, you
Yeah.
know, it's very specific. Like you rig this anchor array, you know, it's like tying a bunch of rope and other equipment, pulleys, things like that to a tree or a bolted anchor, that kind of thing, setting up the lowering devices and you're managing that system. Meanwhile, there's another part of the team that is rigging the there's two simultaneous lines that are going down, so there's redundancy in the system. So there's another
Okay.
person rigging kind of an identical system, and then there's another person that's rigging the rescuer that is actually going over the edge. So there's many parts, and you're only responsible for one part in most of those bigger operations. And then it wasn't until I had been on the team for a year or two that I actually went out and wound up doing some of these things more as small teams, like myself and another climbing partner going out and doing like a climbing rescue.
And Josie, thank you. I love that you emphasize the engineering excellence and the process excellence behind
Yeah.
that. The not having juniors in the field alone and unsupported, also redundancy in systems, and also giving you task-based approaches that controlled for the complexity or the unpredictability of the situation by having procedures that you'd already trained on in the ground under less time pressure, right? So it's a very
Yeah, and thanks for
professionalized
mentioning that
approach.
training. Absolutely. That was,
Yeah.
you know, we would start out every season with a couple days of a rope rescue training, and then we would do like periodic other trainings throughout the season just to make sure that we were all sharp on our skills.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a career change podcast. So I have to ask, tell me about the factors, the forces that led to you starting to initiate a career change or a reinvention of the career that
Hmm.
you'd started there in Yosemite.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the stuff that I mentioned of the excitement, the going out and doing these big long climbs, and then the nature of the rescues being also often climbing related, but if not climbing related, like incidents happening, some of the worst things happening to humans in a place that I love and was recreating in. And I could have a really clear personal identification with that. At the same time, feeling this kind of personal athletic pressure to do the best that I could while I was climbing. And so, for folks that are not climbers, Yosemite is this mecca of like proving ground for rock climbers in a
Mm,
certain
okay. Yeah.
niche of type of climbing, right? And so I was surrounded by world class athletes doing amazing things and seeing the possibilities for myself. Like seeing, I remember a couple of different women doing things that were like, that's achievable for me. Setting speed records on the nose, climbing the nose of El Capitan solo. Um, all of these things were like, oh, I can do this stuff a little bit. I want to try to do this stuff. And so it was for a while there, almost every time I went rock climbing, I was trying to do the next largest, hardest, or faster than I had done before thing. So it was a constant pressure. And as you start pushing these limits, particularly trying to do things faster, which is a silly game that we play in Yosemite, it becomes more dangerous. And so the combination of seeing and responding to these bad accidents and then putting myself in these situations started taking a toll on my nervous system, my relationship to the sport, my relationship to the place, because everywhere I would go would remind me of something bad that had happened. Um, and I remember one moment when I was up, I think I was about 800 or 1,000 feet up on a wall, and my partner and I were establishing a new climbing route that like hadn't been done before. And when you're doing something new, there's no obvious pathway to follow. And I had done this kind of thing a lot, and the climbing in that terrain actually was not near the difficulty that my top end of physical difficulty, but I just froze. I couldn't make a decision of which way to go. I couldn't even commit to going up or down. And I was just stuck. And luckily, my climbing partner, very calming presence of a human, talked me back down to the anchor that he was at. And we rappelled down from there, didn't finish the climb that day. And I realized something needed to change. I was like, I can't have this shutdown thing happen. I had always been very in charge of my own ability to make decisions and do things. And if I lost that, I couldn't trust myself anymore. And I wasn't having any fun, and realizing that every morning if I woke up to go rock climbing, I just had this pit of dread in my stomach. I didn't really want to go, but I kept doing it because it was just something that I identified as, this is who I am, this is what I do. I'm trying to be this athlete, trying to do these amazing things. And so what's interesting was I didn't recognize it as a symptom of my work as an emergency responder, although now I know that it was. Um, I thought there was something wrong with my climbing, and so I started seeing a sports psychologist, and she helped me just start developing awareness, kind of resetting my relationship to climbing. And in my process of working with her and developing these mental training skills and awareness of my mindset, awareness of what I was doing, I realized all of the like, I just needed to change. like I needed to not be in
Yeah.
Yosemite anymore, not be doing this work anymore, and wound up kind of a couple years there of not really knowing what I was doing. But during COVID, wound up moving to Lander, Wyoming, and slowly kind of found my way into Responder Alliance.
May
Yeah, yeah,
I? In
yeah, absolutely.
because I
Sorry,
just
I'm
want to
just
give you
talking.
some admiration and respect. First of all, and thank you for the service and the time that you put in for everyone in the park.
Mm,
And thank you for sharing this reflection with us here with an audience, because one of our values here on the show is that there is a human underneath that armor, and you're not in this alone. So yeah, I've unfortunately had my own challenges with mental health and burnout and well-being in my work, and it takes a lot of courage actually to reflect on it, and to reflect on it in a way that can help others too. So yeah, that's important to me as well, to our first responders and people who serve out there who might be listening to this episode, that you are not in this alone. Change is not weakness, that we will go through many reinventions and refreshes in what we do. We can still be mission driven. To me, and I know your full story now, Josie, so I know where this episode goes and the amazing work you're doing with Responder Alliance. So I really see a thread there. So can you maybe introduce now, what is Responder Alliance and what is the work that they do, and then how did you get involved?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Responder Alliance is an organization that provides stress resilience training to first responders. So, it's focused on developing resilience skills kind of prior to exposure to stressful incidents. Although we know that ongoing exposure to stress is part of the job as a first responder. So building resilience practices and habits is kind of one component of our work, and then building in support systems and organizational resilience practices after exposure to incidents. Um, and though it's a we have four different courses in our curriculum that train on those things: stress injury awareness skills and psychologic first response skills, so that responders can provide psychologic care to people on the scene, to their patients, to the loved ones of their patients, to help prevent stress injury, which is I'll get into a
Yeah.
little bit more of definition of that in a moment, but to prevent that ongoing impact of stress on the people that they serve, and then also bringing those skill sets into their team so that they can provide peer support to each other after exposure to major incidents. And then
Yeah.
ongoing structure from the organization to help establish that peer support, and then help identify when people need more support, clinical care, beyond
Right.
what the lay care provider can give. Mental health professionals is the definitive care to that.
Let's talk about this. And
Yeah.
I've been so interested in Responder Alliance, and I contacted you because I want to get more training, upskill myself, because there is so much skills training, coaching, capabilities, development that anyone, any leader, any individual can actually gain and benefit from this approach. So proactively equipping folks who are at risk of exposure to stress injury by the nature of their work is such a sensible, practical step that I really support, and I wanted to speak with you about it here on the episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, as you were talking about this stress injury occurring on a spectrum, what our founder, Laura McGladrey, who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner and has a background in seeing people clinically for burnout, PTSD, specifically people in the responder community, law enforcement, etc. We're seeing her when they were at this level of injury that they really needed that clinical care and support, and were, at the end of their ability to participate in their careers, relationships falling apart, suicidal ideation, like all of these things that are the worst end of that spectrum. And that's what we have a label for, and that's what clinical care providers will diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder. And Laura saw that there was a need and a possibility of catching symptoms of this illness, this injury, earlier on before it became this life-threatening condition that post-traumatic
Absolutely.
stress disorder is. And so that's how she started developing this curriculum for resilience practices, to recognize early when someone is stress impacted and to start using terminology so that we could communicate about it and say, yes, I am impacted, I am injured, I am experiencing these symptoms such as like sleep disturbances or disengagement, lack of desire to participate in the work, like emotional numbness kind of stuff will happen sometimes. There's a whole spectrum of
Yeah.
symptoms, of which were things that I was experiencing, right, in my work with search and rescue, where I was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Not sleeping. I'm having these, like, remembering these repetitive images of bad things happening in these places that I love that are just triggered by being there. Um, and so yeah, she founded Responder Alliance, started doing these trainings, and actually some of her early trainings were in Yosemite with my team right after I had left. I don't know, it was maybe like 4 or 5 years or so where I was like, oh, I'm hearing about this stuff. And Laura is the head of it. Like, she's the one doing all the
She's
trainings.
fantastic.
And
Yeah.
it seems amazing. And it's really helping the people that, with the same issues that I had had, the people that I still cared about doing the work that I was doing. And
Yeah.
I had simultaneously developed these resilience practices that I had developed through the process of trying to return to being a performance climbing athlete, um, which helped me identify all these other things in my life, right? Like climbing, like any other sport, really is a window into who we are and a good way to train to be better people. So it really helped me. And I came back to search and rescue in Lander, Wyoming, because I started feeling like I could engage with it again. And people were asking me to come because they knew that I had this technical skill set and they wanted me to help train the team on technical stuff. And I was like, I can start
Amazing.
there. I can help give technical training to the team and maybe I can start going on rescues again. Like, we'll see.
Can I again
Yeah.
just emphasize,
Yeah.
I see you actually as scaling your impact through your work at Responder Alliance or through the training that you give, because when you are on the rescue team, you're only one member of that team. But if you can provide these methodologies, this enablement, not only the technical enablement, but also the Responder Alliance and also Mind Athlete and other coaching that you do, you're really scaling beyond what you did previously as an individual on the team. How does
Yeah,
that?
that is a really
Yeah.
cool way to look at it. And yeah, it does feel that way in a lot of ways. I I started Mind Athlete in that time frame when I had moved to Lander, Wyoming, and was sort of starting to work on the search and rescue team here because I realized that in the sports psychology field, there weren't a lot of people providing those skills directly to climbers. So the woman that I had worked with, Chris Heilman, amazing sports psychologist, and she had perspective on climbing, but like I felt like there was more depth that could be done specifically for climbers. So I took a lot of what I learned from her, and then also like I read so many books and took a handful of courses on performance coaching for climbers,
Yeah.
neuroscience of coaching, flow coaching, these things to just like start understanding the brain a little bit more in a performance setting, and then applying my whole background of climbing to that and creating these skill sets, these mental training programs for climbers.
I hope folks who are listening that are maybe in a director, VP, CTO type role are thinking, okay, how does this apply to me? If you really want to build healthy high performance cultures and healthy high performance teams, you've got to get a grip on resilience. You've got to understand that people perceive social threats to their status, to their job. The brain perceives social threats in the same way it perceives physical threats. It's just our brain's neurochemistry at work. So we need to help people be able to be at their best, help them make the job easier on their nervous system when they are doing amazing AI engineering on a critical project, or spending long hours building a project plan or delivering in front of clients. So it's, to me, it's really all part of the human journey and our mind at work. And so that's why I really appreciate you coming on this platform, Josie, and sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that.
I'd love to ask you now, we've talked about where you started, the change that you've made to scale and multiply your impact, while also navigating through challenges, uncertainty. Looking back at Josie's journey in the past, like 20 years here, what have you learned about yourself and your character and what you're capable of?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and this comes directly from my work with Chris Heilman, the sports psychologist, was she asked me a few questions early on in us working together. And I don't think they came back to back, but in my mind, they like stick with me as these specific kind of light bulb aha moments. One of them was because I was complaining about my rock climbing performance, right? Like I didn't love it anymore. I was stressed about it. She asked me what else was going on in my life. And that was when I realized that the impact of working on search and rescue, and then these other, like, there were some major life events that happened during that time that were, big stressors. The loss of my mother was a big one. Now I have the vocabulary for that we use very commonly in our work at Responder Alliance is depletion stress. And when you've been depleted, because there are things like poking holes in your resilience and you're
Big time.
draining, you're leaking
Yeah.
energy from them, then you have less resilience. And then when you're exposed to something major, when you're already depleted, that's when you're much more likely to sustain a stress injury. That was one question that had me start reevaluating my life and creating more balance. Another question that she asked me was, what do I love about rock climbing? I don't know if she used those exact words, but it helped me to really start recognizing why I did this activity that was causing so much stress. And
Yeah.
this is what
Great
I think
question.
really, really
Yeah.
resonates for and is like applicable across anyone's work, life, etc. Is like actually understanding your values as a human and how those tie into what you're trying to do, your like mission. And what I realized in that, and that wasn't a light bulb aha moment. I had to like sit back and evaluate for a while and really reflect.
And can I build on that? Because the core values, the exercise of mining for and reflecting on 3, 4, 5 core values that really drive us, and checking in on that as those change and develop every couple of years is something that I've found really helpful as a light that kind of illuminates certain decisions or certain turning points for me, is relating the choices that are in front of me back to core values. And that helps me simplify things and make higher quality decisions with less regret and more ownership of the decision and more clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it definitely led me to, I think it was actually a couple of years after working with Chris initially that I stumbled upon this values exercise and identified those core values for myself and exactly what you said. Keep coming back to those. One of them for the sake of this journey that I started to identify early on was that challenge and growth are core values of mine. And that is why I like to go rock climbing, or one of the reasons why. And so I started this process of recognizing, again, the emotional awareness, recognizing this feeling of dread inside of me, like recognizing what that actually felt like physiologically, and then knowing logically that I appreciate challenge, like this is a value of mine and why I'm doing this. And it started enabling me to reframe that feeling of dread into a feeling of excitement toward a challenge, a
Yeah.
process called cognitive reappraisal of emotions, which is like a amazing skill to start doing.
Yeah. Yeah. In lower stakes settings too, I play bass in a rock band here in Leipzig. And, you know, when it's go time, when it's performance time, we know that that time is coming, but there's nothing that can fully prepare you for the rush. The lights go up, you're on stage, all eyes are on you. That's the rock musician example. But
Yeah.
recognizing, oh, I'm feeling that familiar day before or that familiar morning of type of anxiety, excitement, all of that, but channeling it in a way, in a pattern that is healthy and helps me get where I want to go with it. I'm so happy that I can access those healthy routes with that emotion now.
Yeah.
But it's because I have a solid base. It's because I'm not in that drained state that you mentioned, which there are
Yeah.
so many external forces and external events that do affect us over time.
And that question of like what else is going on in your life, I've used that so much with the
Yeah.
climbing coaching clients that I've worked with, as well as that being part of the depletion stress language that we use at Responder Alliance. And it's an aha moment for so many people. Be like, oh yes, you cannot perform at your best when you're dealing with like a breakup or
Yeah.
losing a parent or a transition in your career, like all of these things at one time is going to have an impact on your nervous system. And it's not about how strong you are, it's just recognizing that there's these factors involved and then starting to learn to kind of mitigate the things that you can control, right?
Amazing. Amazing. Well, Josie, as we move to wrap up, for folks who want to learn more, want to explore more in this field, where can they learn more about Mind Athlete first, and where can they learn more about Responder Alliance?
Mindathletetraining.com is my coaching business, and then responderalliance.com is Responder Alliance's website, and also social media. Josie underscore McKee underscore is another place you can find me and connect, as well as Responder Alliance also has all social media stuff. It's pretty easy to find if you type into Google searches Responder Alliance.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I know I'm planning on taking advantage of some of the Responder Alliance training. And we also have some athletes in the audience, whether you're in climbing specifically or another area where you're working on upgrading or reevaluating your relationship to the sport. I'd really recommend you get in touch with Josie and explore coaching options to help you with your goals. Thoughtful of you to take a moment to share and reflect on your story. And I'm really excited about what you continue to build for the community around us. So thank you, Josie, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.